Welcome to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast, where we help you in the LGBTQ plus community find a safe and affordable retirement place. Join Mark Goldstein as he interviews others who live in gay-friendly places around the globe. Learn about the climate, cost of living, healthcare, crime and safety, and more. Now, here's your host, Mark Goldstein.
Welcome for another episode of the Where Do Gays Retire podcast. And today we have Salas and his husband Carlos Torres. And they're from Alicante, Spain. And we're going to know everything about Alicante by the end of the podcast. So welcome, Al and Carlos. I'll tell you a little bit about them. Al and Carlos have been together since 2002. They retired from their respective careers in D.C. in late summer 2016 and initially moved to a small mid-Atlantic shore town, Lewes, Delaware, where they have been weekenders for about 2 decades. After wintering for 6 weeks in Spain in 2018, they decided to investigate moving there. And to that end, in 2019, they took 2 3-month reconnaissance visits, the first during winter, the second during summer, to decide where they wanted to move. They fell in love with several coastal cities and towns between and including Valencia and Malaga, Spain, but ultimately decided to settle in Alicante. They sold their Delaware home in 2019 and moved here in mid-February of 2020. Welcome, Al and Carlos, and welcome to the podcast. Tell us your story, how it started, how it happened, how you wound up in Alicante.
Sure, this is Al. He first, as you said, retired to Lewes, Delaware. We'd had a beach house there for years, and we have a lot of friends there, a nice community. But it was interesting, once we were there for a couple of years in retirement, 24/7, we realized how important the weather becomes after you're retired.
Absolutely.
When you have to drag yourself to work every day, it doesn't matter if it's raining or what outside. But so after we'd spent a full winter there, we decided our second winter to book a place in Spain where I had never been and Carlos hadn't been since he was pretty young, in Sevilla specifically, and just to get away from the winter. Well, we had perfect weather for 6 weeks. We loved everything about it. We completely fell in love with the place, and we did a lot of touring from Sevilla in the area. But long story short, we got back in late March to what actually turned out to be record-breaking terrible weather in Delaware for about 2 months. The first morning we woke up to sleet, and it was bad for the rest of the time. And we both sort of turned to each other the first morning and said, why did we leave? And then a couple weeks after that, I suggested to Carlos something he might think about, like what would he think about maybe even thinking about moving to Spain? And Carlos wasn't that excited.
Wasn't that keen on the idea at first, but
he said,
I
that's
definitely understand.
But so we decided the following winter to book another getaway to Spain, but book it in a way that if we were going to move there, these would be the places we would consider moving. So we did a lot of research and decided, well, we want warm weather, we want sunny skies, and so we basically looked at we did a trip from Valencia to Malaga is what we booked, and that was our first reconnaissance trip. And Carlos was like 25% into the idea of moving when we started out on the trip, and within a month, even though we decided Valencia, that was our first month there was in Valencia, even though we decided it wasn't the place for us, he was all in. In fact, we looked at a place in a little town outside, pretty close to Valencia, about halfway between Valencia and Alicante, and a few minutes in, he turned to me and said, do you think we should place an offer? I didn't even know he was into the idea of moving yet, but that's what he said. It was just so spectacular. So that's our story in short form. We came back, we loved Malaga, Carlos was lukewarm on Alicante, but we met a lot of people in Alicante early on, and so we decided to come back and spend a couple months here. We booked 3 months so that we could go back to Malaga and look around a little bit more if we decided we didn't like it here. So we spent a couple months here, and we also spent a couple of weeks each in some smaller towns that we liked nearby. But within the first month we were here, we decided it was really a good place for us.
Wow. Yeah, and it sounds like we're about to do the same thing. Well, we'll have to wait until next year because I'm still working. But yeah, that's what we're in the midst of doing too. We're looking at Valencia. We're going to be looking at and Malaga. Those are the 3 places. We've kind of narrowed everything down. Barcelona is just too expensive for us. Madrid, we want to be on the Mediterranean, so we want that type of lifestyle. So we narrowed it down to those 3, and oh my God, it's like every day I'm looking at different YouTubes and trying to learn about everything, about the culture, about everything, which we'll get into in a little bit. So what do you think was the deciding factor? It's so difficult to make a decision, and I know you spent a lot of time, which is a great thing, but why do you think you chose Alicante over Valencia? Valencia is like the 3rd largest city in Spain, and Malaga is like, it's the Costa del Sol Mediterranean beach lifestyle type thing. Well, why did you say, oh, I think this is it?
It was really, this is Carlos, by the way, and it was really a tough choice for us. As Al said before, we really fell in love with Malaga. It's a beautiful city, lots to do, but we ended up here. The reason is, I think, because of mainly 2 things. One, the people that we met. We met a great group of expats who were very welcoming and showed us around, instantly became friendly with them, not necessarily friends, but friendly. And you always hear that's one of the hardest things to do at our age, is moving somewhere else and immediately establishing a network of friends that you enjoy spending time with.
Especially in another country.
Yeah, exactly. To us, it seemed like this was that group of people. The other aspect was the affordability of the area. It's among the places that we visited for what we wanted, the specific criteria of places that we wanted to live in. It not only ticked off the boxes, but it was way less expensive than the other towns we visited. So it just made sense to us.
Gotcha. Okay, so tell us, geographically speaking, where is Alicante located? And within the city, where are the beaches located, or are the beaches everywhere? Tell us a little bit about that.
So Alicante is on the Mediterranean coast of Spain, in the southeast coast of Spain. It is almost halfway between Barcelona on the north and Malaga on the south. We're 5.5 hours by car south of Barcelona and about 5 hours north of Malaga. So we're basically right in between. The city is located right on the water. It's about 330,000 people population. The beaches are practically everywhere. There's a very big popular public beach right in town, in Center City. Almost anywhere you are in the city, you're about a 15-20 minute walk from it. Very easy to get to. It's very beautiful. It does sometimes get crowded in the summer, but it's still one of the top places to hit. Here where we live, which is just outside of town, about 10 minutes away.
Outside of Center City. We're still in town.
Yeah, exactly. Outside of the center of town. We have beautiful white sand beaches in one direction, a 15-minute walk away. And then there are coves and what are called here calas, rocky coves, going in the other direction, about a 10-minute walk away. So all the beaches are very accessible. That is the highlight of Alicante, one of the highlights of Alicante are its beaches. They're just beautiful.
So
this audience will probably also be interested in knowing that there is a gay beach. It's actually about 15-20 minutes walk from us. It's on one of the rocky shores. But then there's another gay beach south of town also, more traditional white sand beach.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. So, as far as I understand, the difference is, I guess, since Alicante is more compact city and it's not as large as Valencia, you really have to travel to get to the beach. So if
Yeah,
you're
that's
living in,
true. I mean, there is a neighborhood in Valencia that is by the beach, obviously. It's far from Center City and, well, it feels far from Center City. It was about, what, a 30-minute bike ride?
30-minute bike ride.
And it's, their beaches are fine, they're just not beautiful. It's a flat sand beach with a short, comparatively short paseo, that's the walk along the beach with the restaurants.
right.
Alicante is most of the neighborhoods in Alicante are spread out along the beach. So almost anywhere you are, you're, as Carlos said, you're a short walk. And again, because as you said, it's 330,000 versus what I think
800,000.
800,000
Yeah.
Valencia. And much of Valencia is flat also. So when you're not on the beach in Valencia, you don't see it anywhere because the whole city is flat. Whereas here, there are many vistas to the beach, even if you're not on it, because of the hills and even mountains that run right into the city.
So, like where you live, apparently I've seen pictures, so I know you're near the beach or near the Mediterranean somewhat. So, with that view or with the beach around you, is there still like walking? Can you walk to supermarket or grocery stores or pharmacies? Or do you need a car?
Yeah, the whole realm, our doctor is 2 blocks walk, the pharmacy is 2 blocks walk. There are various markets, both supermarkets and the more local fruit and veg markets and meat and carniceria, meat market, within just a few blocks. And the tram stop to Center City is also 2 blocks walk. So where we are, we can do all shopping. There are also loads of restaurants, are basically anything. There are even furniture stores and clothing stores in our neighborhood in walking distance. And we take care of pretty much all of our services needs and most of our restaurant needs in the neighborhood. But we do go into Center City a lot, mostly to see friends and because for some other restaurants and stuff. And that's easy. The tram ride is about 15 minutes from where we pick it up here. And
So you don't even bother driving, you take the tram there.
It varies.
We do both, yeah.
We do both. It depends. Yeah, it depends.
Okay. How about the climate? Tell us, are the summers very hot and humid? Are the winters cold? What are kind of like the average temperatures for the winter and the summer?
Yeah, so here we are in July. This is probably a pretty typical day where the high today is 84. The humidity is 50%. So it's a comfortable, and we closed our windows for the interview to keep any sounds out, but we had the windows open and really nice breeze. And with a 50% humidity, it was very comfortable. We started the average highest temperature that Alicante reaches in any summer historically has been 93 degrees. There are usually a couple of weeks that it barely breaks into the 90s, usually in August. There was a heat wave this year, an early one, where we hit a little over 90 for a couple of days in June, but that's actually not typical. The humidity here is pretty much the same year round. The average is in the 60% range. There are days it'll go up to 85, but then it drops. There are days it's down to 30%, but the typical day is around 65% humidity.
We always tell our East Coast, sort of mid-Atlantic friends and people from Florida that it's way less humid than any of those places. But for friends from where you are, for example, in Arizona, or people in California, it's going to feel a little bit more humid.
Yeah, I'm sure. Everything is relative. I lived in Florida too. We lived in Florida for 4 years and weren't really keen on the humidity. And coming from the East Coast anyway, from New York, we knew what that was about. So
yeah. So it's not as impressive as that, but it's some.
Tell us about, does Alicante have a large expat community? Is that the community that you converse with or become friends with? I understand in going to a foreign country, and it might not just be Spain, but it might be a little bit more difficult to make friends with the locals. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I touched on earlier. One of the reasons we did move here is because of the expat community that we met on our first long-term trip here. So as people research Alicante, I want to point out one thing. There's an Alicante city and an Alicante province. So right. The city of Alicante is within the Alicante province. And a lot of people talk about, oh, Alicante, it's so full of expats. Alicante as a province does have a lot of expatriates, and many from England, Scandinavian countries, Germany, France. Alicante city, however, while there is still an expat presence, it's not as prevalent as it is throughout the rest of the province. It's a very Spanish city. There are, I think within the city, it's about 10 to 12% who are not Spanish born live here. So it's not, like we said earlier, it's not that prevalent. But the people that we did meet, I think we researched it once, there are about 400 to 450 Americans in the city.
So everybody has to register if you're a foreigner. And so there are 450, almost exactly 450 Americans in Alicante City, which it shows it's just a speck in a city of 330,000.
Right.
What's different here is that the North American, I'll call them North American with a few Brits sprinkled in, they created a little social group. And so we're in a group, we socialize with a group that in our WhatsApp group and with other things that we do with them amounts to about 120 people. That's a mix of some locals, some from all over Northern Europe, and a lot of Americans. So Carlos and I also have pursued friendships outside of that. So we do have some Spanish friends or acquaintances. We're in a social group that's of people our age and a little bit younger. That's a group of Spaniards and Argentinians, mostly Latin American, main Spanish speakers, which we've become friendly with and have attended birthday parties, dinners, and studs. But most of our socializing still, we've only been here for a couple of years, is with I'll call them the American expats group, even though it's a sprinkling of people from all over. And we do everything from hiking to bowling. If you had told me 3 years ago I'd be bowling once a month with a bunch of Americans in Spain, I've told you were crazy. But
you're out of your mind.
Yeah. We socialize here far more than we have ever socialized in our lives. And we are introverts by nature. So it's surprising to us that we actually have to say to each other, okay, this week let's carve out.
Let's take a couple days off.
Let's take some days off.
Wow. Nice social calendar.
Yeah, it's been surprising to us. But I think people that have gone through the same journey are interested in being around others that have done the same thing. So it's a good group.
And not to sort of sugarcoat everything, it is difficult to become friendly with Spanish people. Obviously, they've already had their families, their networks of friends that they're used to. So it's a little tougher breaking into that group, but it's not unheard of. People have reached out to us often to include us in inviting us to parties and so forth. So it's a little more difficult, but it's not unheard of.
And I understand that because the culture of the Spanish people are very family oriented. So they have their own social life with basically with their family mostly. And maybe the friends that they grew up with going to school and stuff like that. So I understand that. And everything in the back of our mind is like, are we going to be able to make friends and be able to communicate with people? Because both of us don't know Spanish. We're taking some courses online right now just to get us a little bit familiar with the language. And that's a big concern for us, making friends, because here, we were so fortunate here in Phoenix. We we knew somebody who knew this whole group, this social group. So we instantly became friends with so many people, and we kind of broke off into that group, and you kind of make friends with the people that you get along with most, and so on and so forth. But we have this group of friends where we do things. We go out to dinner, we go out to brunch, and go to shows and stuff like that. So that's our concern too. Are we going to make friends because we don't know the language? Are we going to be welcomed? It's a big thing.
I think it gets to why we ended up in a city at least as big as the one we're in. I had first anyway envisioned us in being some charming whitewashed village, and we actually spent a lot of time in small towns during our visits here, and we realized that what happens, or we started getting a little thinking, like, what happens if you don't click with who's there? I mean, you're stuck.
Right.
We have acquaintances here, Americans, who live in Altea, which is just about 35 minutes up the coast. It's a beautiful whitewashed village.
Gorgeous.
It's actually full of expats, too, of different nationalities. But they often come down to Alicante to do stuff with our group of expats because, I guess, it's limited who's there.
Right.
But I think in any city of this size or large, I mean, I think you're
going to find some pretty
find
large expat groups that you can assimilate into rather easily.
Yeah.
Okay.
It does feel more like a small town in that way, being in a big city, for both its pluses and minuses. I think you would find that probably even in much bigger cities because of the limited number. There are 450 Americans. We know 100 of them. I probably had 100 acquaintances in little Lewes, Delaware.
Right.
So it's not that different. But I think the difference is that they will have gone through the same kind of journey that you have, and they probably have similar values. You have people that are interested in doing new things, interested in exploring and learning in a way that you don't necessarily have especially in a small town.
Right, because you've all gone through the same thing basically, so you have that bond.
Yeah.
So, very good. How about the LGBT community? Is there an LGBT community in Alicante? Do you have to go to Benidorm? What's it like?
So there is an LGBTQ community here in Alicante. It's because of the size of the city. It's a small community. One interesting thing is Al mentioned how we're both sort of introverts, but during our tour from Valencia to Malaga, we actually we looked up, I don't know if you're familiar with the meetup.com group.
Yeah.
So we looked up gay meetup groups in both those cities, and we found one in Valencia, and we went to some of their meetings and enjoyed meeting them, had a fun time. The same thing happened in Malaga. We looked up for meetup groups there and went to their events and had wonderful get-togethers with them. But here in Alicante, there wasn't one. We looked up and there was nothing.
You should start one.
We did. We started
Excellent.
one. We started one in October. We now have about close to almost 150 members.
Wow.
And growing. So the Alicante Pride is actually in about a week and a half. We do it a little bit late here for reasons that I don't need to get into, but so it's a little bit late than everywhere else. But we're going to march as a group in the Pride Parade on Saturday the 16th of July. And it's growing, and we're having a great time. So yeah, if there isn't a community, you sort of make your own. We're having the same issues with that. First of all, it was a lot of gay men came, I think because we were the two guys were the organizers. And then a wonderful lesbian that we met from Dublin asked if she could be an organizer. And we said, wonderful, let's bring you on board. And now we're starting to get more women involved.
Oh, that's great.
That's fantastic. And now the third obstacle, which I think we're gonna overcome, is getting more Spanish people involved.
There you go.
We got a lot of gay and lesbian expats coming, but not that many Spanish ones. But now with this event coming up, the Gay Pride Parade, I would say more than half the people that are going to be joining us on the parade are going to be Spanish. So we're looking forward to that happening and meeting them.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. If there's no community, make one. That's what.
Exactly.
That's what, where do gays retire. I started that. And the reason why I started that, we moved to Florida, and then I could tell my husband wasn't really happy with Florida. Maybe after I tell him, I joke around with him. I say, you weren't happy after the first week. And he was like, no, not at the first week. Maybe it was a couple of months or whatever. But whatever the case may be, that's why I started the group, because I was like, oh, God, we just moved here. Where do gays retire? And it was born, and it started off slow, and then it just exploded. So, yeah, create your own community, and I love that. That's excellent. Kudos to you guys for doing that.
And for those of you who want to look us up, on Facebook, it's Alicante Rainbow, and it's the same thing, Alicante Rainbow.
I'm definitely going to do that and check that out. How about, because I thought that Alicante didn't really have a gay community. I thought everybody went to Benidorm to...
No, there are a sprinkling, probably half a dozen gay bars in Alicante, including on the main Esplanade. One of the prettiest parts of Alicante is one of the bars that we...
Two of them now.
Two of them, that's right.
Well, three, actually.
They're all moving to that area. But so during COVID, a lot of them were in small places with no outdoor space. And so during the lockdowns and such, they were closed up completely. And many of them have moved out into much more open spaces, nice outdoor cafes lined with the other restaurants and bars in the Esplanade, for example. So there are a sprinkling of bars. I don't know of anybody here who travels to Benidorm to go to the gay bars. I suspect it's people that live there and the vacationers that go.
Right.
The vacationers to Benidorm that go. But it does have a big gay...
And for those people who aren't familiar, Benidorm is a town just about less than a half-hour drive just north of us, also on the water. This is one of the cities within the Alicante province that I mentioned about earlier that is hugely an expat community. I would say it's almost 50-50 expats to...
In the summer, the year-round population is 65% Spanish, but you wouldn't know that from going out on the street there. There's actually a British and a Spanish side to it, but in the British side, we were offered a table. When we walked up to a cafe, we were offered a table in English. Gentlemen, you can take this one, without even checking what language
That's unbelievable.
might speak. Whereas that would never happen here.
And yes, that Benidorm has many more gay bars and gay-oriented things, mainly for the traveler, the summer traveler. But yeah, as Al said, we don't know of that many people who actually go there from here to attend the gay bars, because we have our own here.
That's all I noticed is that city has the most skyscrapers that I've ever seen in Spain.
In a tiny area,
Yeah.
It's basically built. It was built as a resort town. I mean, there was a fishing town originally,
right?
Tiny, but it was built as a resort town to generate money for
tourism.
Yeah. So it actually has now the tallest residential building in Europe. They just finished, which is something. But all of those skyscrapers, they're all hotels, condos, apartments. It doesn't really have a commercial aspect to the town except for tourism. So there are no big office buildings like in another city. You see a city that's with skyscrapers, there are offices, but not there. It's all residential.
Let's talk about the economy in Alicante. How about housing costs, rentals versus purchasing, what your electric bill... I mean, everybody's different, I understand that, but kind of an average, just to give us your water bill, gas, taxes, stuff like that.
And I'll let Al go into the housing aspects of it, but before we do say that now, as we're taping this, the dollar, I should say, is almost at parity to euro. It's almost 1-for-1. It's a great, fantastic exchange rate for us Americans who have our investments in dollars.
Yeah.
So whenever we mention a price, it's going to be in euros, it's going to be roughly the same in dollars.
Yeah, oh, cool. Yeah, it was up until a few weeks ago, I think. It was a little less in euros, right, than it was the dollar.
Yeah. Right now, at this moment, each euro is worth $1.02. So it's basically the same.
Yeah. It's pretty
Wow.
close. So I double checked on housing costs, housing prices last night, and so I looked through a real estate aggregator here, and the bulk of I was looking at 2 to 3 bedroom places with 2 baths and a terrace or balcony.
That's what we're looking for.
And most places, the vast majority of places, were in the low 200s to the mid 400s, 400K, 200K to 400K, the vast majority, but decent looking places also with air conditioning. We're
That's
anywhere
important.
from about 90,000 to over $1 million. And these are all like decent. I didn't look at anything really disgusting. That includes both Center City and the beaches, and that includes including penthouses and everything in between. So it's a vast majority low 200s to the mid 400s.
Even mid 100s, you can find some good stuff.
Yeah,
Wow.
there were mid 100. That's true. There were
That's
like
pretty
I said, from
incredible.
90,000. I saw one for 92,000 in Center City that I didn't have a great view, but it was a nice looking place, 2 bedroom, 2 bath, a balcony. So it can be very affordable. The apartments are, again, first of all, this is a bad time of year to be looking at apartment prices because a lot of people take the long-term rentals off the market in the summertime because summer is very popular. It's like high demand here, especially, this year they say it's been higher than it's reached what it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, that's because everybody's trying to get away from
Given that,
being locked in.
again, at least 2 bedrooms, 2 or 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. The range was from about $650 a month for decent, nice apartments, about $650 a month to up to about $1,400 a month. The ones at the upper end, anywhere from we have friends that pay $800 a month that have a 3 bedroom, 2 bath apartment with beautiful sea views.
Wow.
So they can be had for that. Some of the ones I saw in the 700s had nice views of the sea or the mountains or both, but it varies. Again, and at the 1,400 per month level, you're definitely guaranteed a beautiful view and an up-to-date, nice apartment, typically.
And
What did you guys? Oh, I'm sorry. What did you guys do? Did you rent first and then purchase?
Well, we rented the summer that we were here for 2 months, and we ended up making it almost the full 3 months here once we decided to stay. So we rented for 2 months, nearly 3 months as it turned out. And while we were here, and actually before we got our visas, we ended up buying at the end of that time because we found a place that we just absolutely loved. We knew Alicante was for us, and we had a chance to spend a lot of time in the neighborhood. So we did buy even before visas. Everybody says, do not do that.
And you did it.
And we agree.
We agree
that you should rent first. You should definitely not do what we did.
Yeah, but we love every minute that we're here. I said to Carlos this morning, and it happens all the time. I just said, oh my God, it's so beautiful here. Like, we are really happy with what we did. But especially if you're going to live in a Center City neighborhood, I would say you definitely want to get to know the neighborhood.
Right.
So you get to know the sound, the noise, the flow of the neighborhood. I think that's important. So we wouldn't recommend doing what we did, but we're happy we did it.
So do you have a condo?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, ours is it's a penthouse condo, and we have views
And you guys
to
like
the
to garden.
sea and the mountains, and we have a really good. Our condo is small. It's 2 bedroom, 2 bath. The interior is small, but the exterior is twice the size of the interior. We have 2-level exterior, and we're gardening fanatics. So
Wow.
we
2-level.
have a nice thing here is we can garden year round. So we love it.
Can you entertain out there?
We do a
yeah.
lot. Yeah.
Very
so I
nice.
was talking about the size of the apartment, the what we call the inside, the enclosed part.
Interior.
Is about 800 square feet, roughly. The entire place, if you include the terraces, it's approaching like 2,200 square feet.
Wow, that's a
So
huge
the terrace
outdoor.
area, there's also, we have like a 3 season and glass enclosed sort of second living room out there that we use most of the time except for the dead of winter when it gets a little too cold. But yeah, we're out there all the time.
And you're overlooking the Mediterranean?
Yes, we have views of the Med from almost every room.
It's like a dream. It's so calming. Yeah, and, instead of being in a city, it's nice to just look out and at paradise sometimes.
It's very calming. And in terms of, you mentioned utilities too. So in terms of utilities for our, let's say 800 square foot apartment, it varies from, electricity varies from about $40 a month to about, that $40 a month would be the shoulder season, spring and fall, where we have no air conditioning, no heat, no anything on. It's about $40 a month. It goes in the dead of winter or dead of summer, it can go up to about $120 a month when we run air conditioning and or heating. We'd pay water and gas separately. Gas is only for the water heater, and that's very low. I don't know, $20 a month, something like that. And water, our water bills are higher than most people's, again, because as Al said, we're big gardeners. So we have a lot, and everything is planted in pots. So that requires a lot of watering. We pay about $150 every 3 months. We're charged every 3 months. So it's about $50 a month. That's not outrageous, but that would be higher than most people.
How about internet and telephone or?
Also equally inexpensive. We have a plan with a company called Movistar, but every company offers one, where we get internet, Wi-Fi, and 2 cell phone lines for roughly, that's right, the TV as well, the cable. The entire package is about
It's 80 something.
No, it's gone up. It's about $130 a month for everything included. They have some good bundled packages here where they include everything for you, and it's reasonable. It's definitely less than $150 for everything. Most of them are around $100 a month.
And you can get the same things like Netflix and everything else that we get, right?
Yes. Yeah.
As long as you just
Netflix
stream it.
available, Hulu, Amazon Prime, everything.
Yeah, all of it.
Very good.
This is a detail, but it might be important to some people. What's licensed in Spain for things like Prime and Netflix varies a little bit. So we see most of the same things that Americans would see, but not all. We see there are more Spanish shows available than most Americans would see. But friends of ours do use a VPN that locates them, quote unquote, in the US, and so they still see everything. And there are various apps that you can get that you can see even the network TV, and they do that as well.
Very good. Very good. How about the arts and culture scene? Does Alicante have anything to offer in that arena? I know it's not going to be like a New York City or Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I think it's a typical for what you'd find in a city of its size. It has a handful of museums, galleries, lots of performance space. There's both the city performance spaces, a handful of them, and then there's music everywhere, bars and restaurants. They tend to be more outdoors here than you would find in most, I would say, except for California, most American cities, because the weather is nearly always good enough for a performance outside. But yeah, there are a number of performance spaces. We saw, our first summer here, we saw at the main theater, West Side Story, all Spanish version of a Spanish touring group, and it was it was fun.
I would still know everything that was going on because I watched it. It's one of my favorite movies.
Exactly. That's the reason we went. Because even though it was in Spanish, you hold the storyline, you know everything about it, so you can follow along easily.
It was pretty fun. We just saw a pop star here in one of the big concert halls, a Spanish pop star that my Spanish instructor introduced me to, and unfortunately it was us, a few husbands and boyfriends, and a whole bunch of girls, because he's a heartthrob, but he came out recently, so that's why my Spanish teacher thought I might be interested.
Well, yeah, it sounds like you do have some sort of culture, which is great. to have. How about the food scene? Are you guys foodies? Do you enjoy going out to dinner? Do you cook at home?
We do love going out to dinner, and it's very inexpensive here. I would say, yeah, maybe we're a little bit of foodies. One of the criteria for me to wherever I lived, we decided to live in, was it had to have at least one excellent Indian restaurant, because I love Indian food. And there are a handful of excellent Indian restaurants here in Alicante, mainly because they are catering to the British tourists, of which there are many. And British people love Indian food. So yeah, there are excellent Indian restaurants here. In terms of sort of 5-star restaurants, there are a few. They're called Michelin-starred restaurants here. That's
right.
That's the big group that follows.
That's what I've heard.
Restaurants here. There are a couple. We've tried a few. They were excellent. And again, because Alicante is such a popular tourist destination, it offers a wide range of sort of international foods. Great Italian, great Indian, good Thai.
They're the kind of new restaurant scene that we had in DC is just starting here.
Right.
The fusion food, stuff like that. We've been to a Asian Mexican fusion that was actually some of the best food we've had since we left DC. And that same group has opened up a bunch of restaurants very recently, just in the last year, and we haven't even tried them all. We've had Eastern, West Africa, we've had Moroccan, West African, really tasty. So you don't get quite like when we were in DC, it seems like every week there were new restaurants opening, and we'd try it, and we loved
just
it.
like New York.
Yeah,
right.
But you don't get as much of that here, but there's plenty of variety.
And if you've been paying close attention, there's one type of restaurant that we haven't mentioned yet, and it's on purpose. Strangely, even though Mexico was settled by the Spanish,
there's no
the
good
Spanish do not like spicy foods.
Really?
Yep, spicy food is not a thing here. So the one thing that is lacking are good Mexican restaurants.
That's what I heard. It's the same, I think, in Valencia too. They say they're lacking Mexican and Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're Chinese.
We've seen some Chinese. We haven't really tried them. Wouldn't be amongst our favorites, but yeah, Mexican is very hard to find throughout the entire Spain. It's not just Valencia or Alicante, it's everywhere.
Yeah, we found one great one in a nearby town here. It's about 15 minutes drive, and then we found one good one in Malaga. I mean, really, we looked around. We found nothing in Valencia when we were there. There may be now. It's strange, but true.
Yeah, and there's also, in terms of expense, one thing I wanted to mention is a lot of these restaurants have something that is called a menú del día, or a menu of the day. And it's a fixed price meal. It usually includes an appetizer, a main course, a drink of some sort, beer, wine, soda, and either coffee or dessert. And that's usually anywhere priced around $10 to $20 per person.
Wow. That's like a 3-course meal with the drink.
Exactly. And it's only offered midday. The big meal here of the day
is lunch.
What they call comida. And that's eaten usually between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. is the time that places are open for lunch here. The meals here tend to be later in the day than what we were used to.
That's what I'm going to have to get used to, because
yeah,
when you're eating dinner, I'm in like my second dream.
Yeah.
Well, to be clear, we don't eat dinner late. Our main meal is that the middle of the day meal, and
we've adapted making that our main meal.
That's our main meal. We don't do a big dinner. We'll have something really light, or we'll often go out on the early end side of things at about 8 o'clock. Yeah. And have like a tapa and a glass of wine or something.
So yeah, and the thing, just to flesh it out a little bit more, the one thing that Alicante is best known for, they don't call it paella here because that's what they call it in Valencia.
Right.
So here, and there's a little bit of a rivalry going on. In Alicante, it's just simply called arroz, or rice. Arroz. It's a rice dish. And it's made, and it can be made with anything. The most iconic one here is called arroz a banda, and it's made with a fish stock, and it includes peeled shrimp,
white fish,
some sort of white fish, and calamari. and it's delicious, but that's usually only served for lunches. You rarely get if you order an arroz for dinner, they know you're a tourist.
You're a tourist. Yeah, that's what they say, that you don't order that for dinner.
It's so common that even there's one carryout near us that only serves arrozes. They have like, what, a dozen types of combinations. And you put down a deposit, they give you the whole pan
Wow.
in a box, in a paella pan in a box, freshly made. And it's wonderful. We've done that. When we entertain during the day, that's one of our favorites.
That's what I would do. Yeah, order in.
Yeah.
So if I went to a restaurant and ordered paella, they'd look at me and say, "Oh, tourist."
Yeah, but that's okay.
So I have to say arroz.
Arroz, yeah.
Arroz. Okay.
You've got the R's.
You can roll your R even. That's excellent, yeah.
Arroz. I'm trying. And I also learned in the language arena that instead of pronouncing it with a C, it's like Valencia or Andalusia.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I'm getting there. So tell us about transportation. So I know there's the rail, there's high-speed trains, there's, I guess, a light rail that goes up and down the coast somewhat to get you into Center City and even north. How often do they run? I'm kind of like thinking on the same size as here in Phoenix. It's kind of small light rail, but we do have one, and it's right across the street from where I live, so I just could hop on the light rail. Is it like that?
Yeah, so I think any city this size in the U.S. would die to have the transit that we have here. The tram or light rail, well, for example, frequency, where we live, there are 2 lines that go by our place a couple blocks away. So there's one every 15 minutes. So we never have to worry too much about getting there on time or whatever. There is the city, it's all by zone, the city zoned lines, and I think there are 5 of them, something like 5 lines going to different parts of the outskirts and ending up in Center City. Then a couple of lines, well, one of the lines runs way up the coast. It's like 60 miles up the coast to Benidorm, to Altea, to another really interesting town, Galpe, Denia, and Villajoyosa, all coastal towns that are nice to see, nice to walk around, nice. They each have their own character. So, and then, of course, there's a fast train to Madrid and to Valencia. Well, Valencia may not be a fast train. To Madrid, it takes 2.5 hours, or no, 2:15. We just went. We used to go from D.C. to New York to get the different experience.
Right.
And it was always such a chore. The train, you're fighting in the train. It's expensive. It's the worst. It was a breeze. The Alicante train station is very busy, but it's a small station. You need to get there 15, 20 minutes ahead of time. We're up in Madrid, the center of Madrid, in 2.5 hours. It felt like nothing.
That's wonderful.
It's so easy.
Bus lines are great.
Oh, the bus lines too. The buses are clean and used by everybody. We used them a lot the first summer. Where we are, the tram is actually easier, but there are a couple of lines that run through. There are several lines that run throughout the town, and very regular also. So you can't. The transit overall in most of Europe is fantastic.
It's really good, yeah.
In the U.S., of course, and the transit here in Alicante it's amazing. It's for the size of the city it is.
Can you walk? You could walk to the tram from where you live, right?
Yeah, we're 2 blocks.
Oh, that's
2
excellent.
blocks.
That's excellent. Yeah, and airfare to other European countries are really cheap as well.
It's crazy cheap.
It's like $60 one way.
Yeah, you can play. There are offers for 60, 70, 80 round trip. One of the nice things, Alicante Airport is the 5th biggest in Spain, even though Alicante is not one of the biggest cities. In fact, it's about twice the flights here as go to Valencia Airport, even though Valencia is a much bigger city. And the history of that is that Alicante has always been popular with all of Northern Europe, and therefore there are flights to just about any place you want to go in Europe, direct flights from here. But that's also true of Malaga. Malaga is a little bit bigger. It's fourth biggest, so it has great connections.
Wow.
But yeah, the airfares are really cheap here. That's one of our criteria was to be within 30 minutes of an airport.
Yeah, and that's what you are, 30 minutes?
Yeah.
We're about 20 minutes from the
About
airport.
20.
20 minutes? Yeah, and just to think that you can be in like Paris in a few hours
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
for next to nothing.
Not even a few. I mean, everything's so close. Well, we just went to Porto, almost for the moment, Portugal. Friends of ours said, hey, there are great flights to Porto. Do you guys want to go with us? We said, sure. And 2 weeks later, we flew to Porto for nothing. And it's an hour, a little over an hour, 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
I mean, it's amazing, and that's what it is around here. Most of our friends, half the time, half of them are someplace else.
Traveling.
Yeah, I don't blame them. I mean, for the price and where you can go, I mean, you can go anywhere, pretty much, in Europe for little money. So, is there any traffic, so to speak of, in Alicante?
Funny you to ask, because we remember we rented a car that first reconnaissance trip when we were looking at all these places from Valencia to Malaga, and we drove everywhere. And we came to Alicante and we're looking at each other and saying, where is everybody? Why is there such little traffic in this town? And it's surprising, but yes, there is not really that sort of rush hour traffic that you hear about often.
Right.
It just doesn't exist here. It's for a city of 330,000. It's not that trafficy at all. It's very easy to drive in town.
Yeah, it is easier for us to drive from where we live to Center City, far easier and far faster than it was for us to drive from our little town of Lewes to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which is not that different in how far we were, but the roads are so light. I mean, that's one reason we often drive instead of take the tram, because it's just easy to drive around. There's no such thing as a traffic jam here. We just have never run into it.
Yeah.
So speaking of driving, do you drive a stick shift or an automatic or a manual?
I do. I drive a stick shift. Now we'll probably get into this, but there's
To me, it's like,
one of the hard. I'm struggling because I'm trying not to not to play it down too much. But I will say one of the hardest things to do when you come to Spain is exchange your U.S. license for a Spanish license. It can't be. It's not done automatically, and it's mainly because in the U.S. all our licenses are state licenses rather than federal. And here it's a federal license, so they don't. Instead of recognizing 50 different states, they just say you have to basically start all over.
Ugh.
So you have to take a written test, then you have to pass a driving test. And the written test you can take in English, that's okay. The translations are horrible, but if you take enough practice tests, you're sort of used to them. The driving test is a different story. It's done in Spanish. They'll give you the instructions in Spanish, so you have to at least know left, right, forward, that sort of thing. And it's difficult. It's not easy.
That's what I hear.
It's not a pleasant experience.
Do they make you take it within 6 months of getting there? And
Exactly.
then you can't.
You can use your U.S. license for the first 6 months. It's allowed here. But after that, you need to have a Spanish license.
But what I thought was the way they were saying it is after 6 months, you need a Spanish license. But if you don't take it within that 6 months, you can't take it again. Is that true? Or you can take it any time. You can let your U.S. go for 6 months, and let's say a year later you decided you wanted a license, a Spanish license. Can you get one a year later,
yeah.
2 years later?
You can take the test at any time.
Oh, okay. I thought there was a deadline, and it's like, nope, you got to take it in 6 months, and that's it.
It's only about how long you can use the U.S. license. It's not about one or the other.
Yeah, you can take the test at any time.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about crime. Is there any crime in Alicante, so to speak of? Will I be fine walking my dog at any time in the night, in the evening, without having to look over my shoulder like I would maybe in the U.S.?
Yes. Obviously, there's crime everywhere, but Alicante seems really, I won't say it's crime-free, but it's probably crime of opportunity. You might hear of pickpocketing, but even that is nowhere near to the extent that you hear about it in places like Barcelona or Valencia.
Yeah.
Again, probably because of its size. You certainly don't hear violent crime very much at all.
And then you have no guns.
And on any night in Alicante we've been out late recently because of the festivals that have been going on, but women are walking alone on the street commonly, very commonly. Violent crime is almost non-existent here. I looked at the crime stats of a couple of years ago, and I don't know if you know the wealthy suburban county outside of Washington, D.C., Montgomery County, Maryland, very high-end, had twice the violent crime with half the population that Alicante has. So it's almost non-existent. Most of the little bit that I've seen, it's usually within a family. We have been out, we're not late night people normally, but we've been out recently because there's been a big festival going on. Late at night, I walked to where my bike was on abandoned streets, and you don't feel like you have to do what you do in American cities, look around and see who else is on the street, because people don't have guns here. It's just so different.
What a difference.
Do not have shootings.
I don't know if you're attuned to what's going on every day in the U.S. now, but it's like every day there's either a mass shooting, something's going on. Even I get the local news here in Phoenix, it's just terrible. I mean, this one's been shot here, and I don't know how they're going to resolve the problem, and the only way for me, in my mind, is just to take away guns, but that'll never happen. So it's a very big concern.
Our European friends here always ask us, what is it with Americans and guns? Because you can't imagine, even in the little tiny town of Lewes where we lived, we feel safer walking around at night here than we did there, and I commented on it. I comment on this often when we're out. I'm like, this is so nice. And of course in DC, you are always weighing, you're looking at who's on the sidewalk, should I move differently, should I cross? And it's just not the case here. You also don't have, it's another part of that is you don't have the same kind of poverty here. Even though the average incomes in Spain are way lower than they are in the US, the bottom is supported upward so that you rarely see homeless people here. You don't have abject poverty. There is a base level. They actually implemented in the last year a basic, I forget what they call it, but everybody has a baseline income, basic income.
Yeah.
So there is nobody that can't survive without the way that you see just abject poverty in the U.S. in areas.
And so the government kind of steps in. So if somebody is close to homeless, I guess they would put them in some sort of government shelter to get them off the street.
I'm not sure why. I'm not sure that's what happens, or that this family unit is stronger.
That's what I was about to say. It's that the Spanish family unit is so strong. If someone is struggling, they usually often depend on their families for support. You see a little bit of homelessness here, but very little. Not very much at all.
In American cities, it seems like every block sometimes you see somebody.
Last year we went to Seattle on vacation, and I was shocked at just looking on the streets. There are camps set up with tents, people in tents all over the place. And it was shocking. And
we've heard that Seattle and Portland both have.
Portland too. I went there too.
But even in DC, it was almost every block you'd see somebody that was hungry.
That's one of the reasons.
It's incredibly good for the psyche. I will say that. And we felt this way in almost any of the cities or towns here. It really is. Valencia also felt very safe. For a huge city, feels incredibly safe. Malaga also.
Yeah, that's what. I can't wait to visit. because, yeah, I just have to see it for myself.
Yeah.
So tell us about healthcare. That's a big concern because we are getting older. We're not getting any younger, and we require, so both my husband and I, we have some pre-existing conditions that we need to take care of at good medical facilities. So we need good doctors. We'd love to be around a really good hospital. Tell us a little bit, tell the audience about what that's like in Alicante. Since it's a smaller city, do I have to travel outside of the city to get health care or good health care?
There are several state-of-the-art hospitals here. We've had actually more than one friend, but definitely one friend who had a heart attack. He went to the local, his closest hospital. He raves about the treatment he got, and he's fine now. I tested out our healthcare system early on. I had what we call the papaya incident, where I actually was discovered in a bad way and that I'm allergic to papaya.
Oh.
And I became violently ill, so ill that I couldn't even go to the local hospital. And the insurance company sent a doctor, a house call. They emailed us the prescriptions that Carlos could pick up, and they sent a doctor to do a house call on me.
Wow.
Then I had some repercussions from that, so I actually had to visit emergency a couple of times. Both times I had an IV. I was being treated with an IV within minutes, 15 minutes
15 minutes.
of the time I got to the emergency room. In all cases, had somebody speaking English well enough that that we could communicate. Hospitals here provide a translator if you don't speak Spanish.
That's a concern.
And the most amazing thing with all of this, there was never a bill. You don't even fill out a form. You show them your card, and that's it. That's it. The only thing that aren't covered here are prescriptions, but the prescription price that we pay is almost always equal to or less than what our copay was on our platinum insurance.
That is
in the
unbelievable. That is unreal. So getting into the cost, so you have to, if you become a resident, you have to buy into the private health care, correct?
Right. So that's one area we haven't gotten into yet, is the cost of healthcare. Yes, in order to obtain a visa for the first year that you live in Spain, you have to purchase private healthcare. You can't be a part of the public system yet. So in that first year, for example, we spent about, I would say it's somewhere around a tenth of as much as we spend in the U.S. for a private plan. We retired slightly early in the U.S., so we weren't eligible for Medicare yet. We were spending about
$2,300
a month between the two of us, for both of us
That's a
together.
lot.
for the insurance,
Yeah.
which of course had deductibles and copays
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
amounting to hundreds of dollars.
And here,
Thousands.
the private insurance here cost us less than $300 a month. It was about $280 a month.
For both of you.
For the both of us together.
Wow.
And that was no copays, no deductibles. It covered everything, like Al said, except prescriptions. Prescriptions here, over the payment that you give, the full payment that you pay for, was about equal to our copay in the U.S.
That is just unreal. Like
yeah,
$20, $25.
Even less. The stuff that we buy here, I take cholesterol meds, and
So
a
do I.
month's worth is about $6.
Wow. Yep.
And that's going to be true anywhere you are in Spain, pretty much. The doctor, our general practitioner here, who's 2 blocks away, speaks perfect English. The access is another thing. I don't know if you have this issue. Phoenix is pretty big, but when we first retired to Delaware, getting a new doctor required, as a new patient, was 6 to 8 months, depending on what it was. Specialists were all more than 6 months. Dermatologists required you make an appointment anywhere from 6 months to a year in advance there.
Yeah.
I mean, even my longtime DC, it was 3 months. So here, when we called for our first appointment with a general practitioner, for an appointment that would be for both of us so that we had that amount of time,
Right.
the receptionist apologized because we called on a Wednesday and her first appointment wasn't until the following Monday.
That's
When
a
we call
joke.
for dermatologists, new patients, we were in the office getting our exam 2 weeks later. I mean, the
Yeah.
access is it's just so different. People say that if Americans knew the difference, there would be a revolution. I mean, it's it's unbelievable the difference, and the care is very good. We've
We do have long waits.
Yeah. Well, not on the that's the difference. We should clarify too. On the private insurance, there's very little wait for anything. Once you've been here, once you've lived in Spain for a year, you can opt to buy into their public system as well, public health care. That is even a little cheaper than the private one. I think you end up paying 65 euro a month, something like that. I think
Yeah.
per person. I want to say until you turn 70, and then it goes up to 100 or something, 120. But it is cheaper. The only difference being that your primary care physician is assigned to you. You can't choose who you want to go to. And then some elective surgery, if you ever have any sort of elective surgeries, there might be a wait to get in. That's really the only difference.
Yeah, we've kept our private because it's cheap and we like our doctors, and we figured we'd hold on to it.
Did you opt into the public
Not
one?
yet.
The public one, not yet. Not yet.
They
'Cause I
say that
understand.
the one good thing about public is it covers everything. There is no pre-existing conditions, all of that are covered. So as you get older, if you have, many people do join public, and we may opt into public in coming years, but so far we're good.
And what I heard, God forbid someone gets cancer,
Yeah.
they figure the way Spain thinks about it is you're suffering enough just having that, we're paying everything. So as long as you're in the public health care, you don't pay a dime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the type of care actually that they say is even better in the public system than in the private system.
Right.
A lot of people here say we'll stay on the public system unless, as you say, God forbid, we get something horrible like cancer, and then we're going to opt into the public system because the care there is often better than in the private.
Yeah. It's such a difference, God, between price and just the system in itself. Yeah, the U.S. has to do something again, overhauling their healthcare system. And I'm sick of watching commercials about different types of drugs that'll kill you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what happened to Please Don't Squeeze the Charmin or Madge with her Palmolive? And now I listen to Ozempic, of a drug that I haven't heard of, that it's for one to treat something and then it could kill you. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, a bit much.
So, okay. So one of our main concerns were going to a hospital and not being able to communicate, but you said that they do have interpreters, which is a good thing because we would probably need one, and especially if there's an emergency.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's going on as it is, and you're not thinking properly, you need English.
Yeah.
You need somebody there to interpret. Okay.
And most of the doctors we've seen, almost all the doctors we've seen, with one exception, spoke perfect English.
That's
So,
great. That's
Yeah, and if not, they can, like you said, they can find an interpreter in the hospital.
And maybe because in Alicante has such a large expat community that I think it's needed there because there's a lot of
Right.
Brits that speak English too.
Right.
Okay. So what do you wish that you had in Alicante that you don't have, or is there something that you miss from living in the U.S.?
Honestly, there isn't very much. We hate sugarcoating it, but we are ecstatic here. We love being here. One thing we might miss, well, in addition to what we've talked about before, a decent Mexican restaurant.
Right.
Alicante is a very arid area. We get very little rainfall. So, as Al said, we both love gardens. So we don't have big, lush, beautiful botanic gardens here. It's all more of an arid place, lots of beautiful palm trees and that sort of thing, but not lush tropical gardens. What else? Anything else for you?
The only thing, crab cakes.
Oh,
I
right.
miss crab cakes. They don't do them. The blue crab apparently is newly invasive around Valencia, and they're starting to learn how to use it, but it's not, like I can't go out and buy a pound of blue crab, which for a Marylander That's
Yep.
really hard.
Yeah.
I used to make crab cakes a lot.
Yeah, I love crab cakes. So Mexican and crab cakes. Okay.
Yeah, those are the two things.
That's
that
it. And family and friends, of course.
Goes
But
without saying.
that's a given.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I could deal with that. I think I could give up crab cakes and Mexican. I'll have my Phoenix friends import some Mexican food. Send us some Mexican food. So tell us about how to obtain a visa. Was it difficult? Did you go through a lawyer? Did you go through like a residency expert that helped you? Or did you do everything yourself? Did you look online? And I know there's so much bureaucracy.
Yeah, we felt it was quite easy actually. We did it all ourselves. On the US side, we did it all ourselves. The consulate has all the requirements. We didn't find any of the requirements difficult to have done. We started in late October of 2019, pulling together what was needed. We submitted them mid-December 2019, and we were approved a month later. So it took us about a month and a half, 2 months
yeah.
to pull the documents together. Some we were waiting for the FBI background check, stuff like that. But if you follow the list that's on the consulate website, we didn't find it difficult at all to accomplish. On the Spanish side, once you get here, what they give you is what's a temporary visa. And once you arrive in Spain, you do need to have a couple of appointments to register yourself here, basically, and to get a residency card. And to make it, although most of the people we know didn't hire anybody, just to make it easier, we did. We got a local attorney and the firm will then help you get the appointments you need, make sure you have what you need. The papers are a subset of the papers you used on the U.S. side, but we did do that, and then so that gives you, the way it works in Spain, you get a residency that's first good for 1 year. At the end of a year, you submit documents while in Spain. You don't have to go back to the U.S., of course. For the second year, at the end of the year, you resubmit, and it's good for 2 years. Then you'd have to do that once again at the end of those 2 years, and that's good for 5 years. Oh no, that's
another two.
Right, 2, 1, 2, 2, and after that it's 5, and after that it's
Permanent residence.
It's permanent residence. After you've been here 5 years, should you choose to, you can. We're on the non-lucrative visa, which means we cannot make money here.
Right.
We cannot work here.
We cannot work here. So after 5 years, you can work if you choose to, even on the non-lucrative.
Heaven forbid.
Oh, okay.
But we don't want to.
By that time, no. It's out of the question.
And I don't know if you want to go over. Do you want to go over any of the requirements that you need to get a visa?
Yeah, like just briefly tell us what you had to go through.
Well, for the main thing is you have to prove that you meet the financial requirement, which is either liquid assets, Social Security, other income, 401k, whatever. That for one person is right now about 28,000. For two, it would be 35,000, and that adjusts essentially based on cost of living every year. In addition, you need things like FBI background check or state background check if you haven't moved for 5 years.
You need to buy that private health insurance for a year. And then you get from your doctor. You have to get a sort of a health sign off that you don't have any communicable diseases or anything like that.
Right.
That's much
basically it.
There might be a couple of other things, but that's basically the big one.
Yeah.
So what's the advantage of a golden visa? So a golden visa, you need to purchase property, I think worth $500,000 or more, or have investments in Spain. I think it's $1 million. I'm not sure, but something like that. But what would that do for me? Like if I'm purchasing a property and it is $500,000, what advantage would that bring to me?
It's slightly easier to get the visa if you do that, only slightly, and there's really small advantages. You still have to go through a lot of the requirements to get the visa, like the background check and They have to make sure, even though you're buying a property for $500,000, you still need to prove that you have the resources, the financial resources to live here without being dependent on the state, that sort of thing. But the advantages are you're allowed to work. For example, if you chose to, you can work on a golden visa. You also don't have to be here in Spain a required number of time, a certain amount of time. For a regular visa, you have to be here at least, in order to renew it, I should say, you have to be here at least 183 days physically in the country. For the golden visa, you just have to make one trip a year, basically. And you could be here for a day and then go back.
For a day and then go, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
And then that's it. You're still considered a resident, but you don't have to be here that amount of time. And if you're looking into it, taxes, for example, you become a tax resident of Spain when you've lived here for 183 days in a calendar year or more.
Okay.
Then if that's the case, you have to pay the Spanish income and wealth taxes. On the non-lucrative visa, you could live here one day and still be considered a Spanish resident, but you won't have to pay income taxes until you've been here for at least 183. So that's another benefit. It's also very easy to get your spouse or children on the visa. Once you prove you've made the investments, they're allowed to get the visas as well. That's basically the only difference, really. It's the ability to work, and you don't have to spend a lot of time here if you don't choose to.
I could see that for a lot of people. For me, I don't think I'm going to be working after I move or traveling back and forth. No, that's not something I'll be doing. So, okay. Thank you for that. Living there for a few years now, is there any cons at all? Do you think there are any cons? I mean, everything, we always think of it as a great place, of course, but is there any cons that we should, or our audience should know about?
We struggled with this question. Really, aside from friends and family, one or the other of us often says, we're so lucky to be here. I mean, without even thinking about it, we say, oh my gosh, we're so lucky to be here. We see whether it's something, we see something in the news, we look out at the weather, we're out walking along the shore, and but something, we also have enjoyed the challenge of getting to know the culture, of living a different way. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to move is I was afraid we were going to turn into vegetables in Delaware, that you don't have to learn anymore. The job isn't keeping your mind active.
Right.
So there are challenges, I think, in making this kind of a move, but that was part of what was exciting to me, and still is. I mean, I'm learning Spanish. It's going to be a lifelong effort for me, I'm sure, but it keeps the brain going. I think through these conversations, the times I go to the market, or even when I sit down to the restaurant, I think through, how am I going to say this?
What are you going to say?
What am I going to say? But that's all great for the brain.
Yeah,
and
it is.
I feel like that kind of challenge, knowing that it's not going to be the same in the U.S., all of those things, if you're not a person who is open to living slightly differently, it could be a lot of cons, probably. But for us, we just haven't encountered them. I mean, we've been
and again,
lucky.
not to sugarcoat everything, there are some obstacles. Like I mentioned before, the driver's license was a difficult thing to obtain.
Yeah.
You do have a fair amount of bureaucracy that you have to deal with.
Right.
And I was born in Cuba, so I do speak Spanish, and I'm able to get myself understood with the bureaucrats. But I can imagine someone who doesn't I have struggled sometimes to get my point across to a bureaucrat about XYZ. So I can imagine someone who doesn't speak any Spanish at all would have a little difficult time doing it.
And we have friends here who do it.
Yeah,
I
do
mean,
it all the
most
time.
of our friends here, our American friends here, do not have a partner that speaks Spanish. Carlos occasionally accompanies some of them when they are going for certain things.
I'll be knocking on your door.
You're welcome to. You're welcome to. Happy to do it.
Yeah, that's what we kind of, and I think of it as an adventure. you have to be open-minded, definitely have to be open-minded, and trying to immerse yourself into another culture and go in with that mindset, because if you think you're going to do it the U.S. way and you're not going to survive, and that's not something that I want to do. If I'm going and I call myself, I wouldn't even call myself an expat. Maybe I would to other expats, but I'm an immigrant, and I'm an immigrant in another country. So I think of myself here in the U.S. and thinking about immigrants, how tough they had it too, and with their language barriers. And sometimes U.S. people are not tolerant, and I put myself in that situation. So, yeah, I definitely go in with an open mind, and I'm here in your country. I'm your guest. I'm the guest. I'm not here to say, well, we did it in the U.S. this way. Like going to a new company. Well, we did it that way, or we did it this way. No, it's different. It's different circumstances. So,
and by the way, I mean, we found it more here than anywhere, but in general in Spain, if you make even the tiniest effort, they are so, like in the bakery, I was trying to order something. I apologized. I said, in Spanish, I'm sorry, I'm still learning Spanish. And her face just lit up. She smiled and she said, "Poco."
Little by little.
And they're we just had blood tests this week, and I said that wrong. I said yes y cuatro instead of 14, which is a really dumb mistake. But she didn't even flinch, wrote it down, and she proceeded to speak to me in English.
Yeah, that's comforting.
Yeah, so it's I think the French are really. There are a lot of Northern European. I mean the Spanish. There are a fair number of Northern Europeans who don't try to assimilate at all, and Americans aren't seen as that group, and so they seem to be very warm and welcoming to us, especially when we make the effort to just try to speak the language.
Yeah.
In terms of bureaucracy, once again, there's a thing here called a gestor, gestor. It's a person you can hire to help you manage the bureaucracy, and that's very inexpensive. They're not lawyers; they're just people who know how to get things done, basically.
Yeah.
And they all speak English, and it's another option.
Yeah, and that's probably what we need to, just to get through on the Spanish. Once you get there, the Spanish side, to get your ID card so you can open up a bank account, so on and so forth. I understand that's difficult too, if you don't know the language especially. Right. So,
well, bank accounts are pretty easy depending on where you go. I mean, our bank, they speak English. Yeah. It's actually not hard, but having a gestor, they're cheap, and they're actually, and it's an official position. There's a schools of gestor. There's one There's one here in Alicante. So
it's like a notary.
It's a legitimate profession, and it's really useful. Or can be.
Yeah, it's something that I have to definitely look into. I mean, there's so many different things. Then you think about, how about your will and stuff like that you have back in the States? Is it different if you're living in Spain? Do you have to have a lawyer and do it all over again because you're in a different country?
We decided to do it very easily. And yes, we had there are a couple of things we did hire a lawyer for. So Al mentioned getting the appointments and getting the stuff set up here when we first arrived. We also have an accountant/lawyer that does our taxes, because although it's easy, I don't want to have to deal with bureaucratic language and all that stuff.
I'm with you.
So they do that. We also hired one to do our wills. And it was, again, inexpensive, because what we decided to do was just say, whatever property we jointly owned in Spain goes to the other person if something should happen to either one of us. And once we're both gone, it should just be sold and put into the estate. And then the rest of it just said, everything else that is owned jointly outside of Spain reverts to the U.S. will, period.
Oh,
and
okay.
You give them a copy of the U.S. will, they put those two together, and that's the end of that.
Okay, sounds easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we'll have to get some attorneys involved in that as well.
Exactly.
So, in wrapping up, what would you say to our audience about relocating to Alicante?
So I would say the same as I'd say for any city, any new location. I recommend spending at least a couple of weeks. I think it was good. I think it'd be good to spend as much time as you can, because seeing these cities on the ground is really what makes the difference. And I'll say nothing was as we expected anywhere, really. We tried to watch the videos. We tried to figure out ahead of time what we'd want, and where we ended up is nowhere we thought we'd be. As I said, we thought we'd be in a little white village. But I think spending time getting a feel for the place is really the most important thing.
And being open to new experiences, being open to differences in culture, and just generally accepting what comes your way and dealing it as best you can.
Oh, one other thing. I think it's most advisable to come to Spain, since you're thinking about especially if you're thinking about coastal, twice. Come in the dead of winter and come in the worst of summer. Because I think that's when it's at its worst. And every place is beautiful in the spring and fall, let's face it. But
Right.
spring and winter are when places can be at their worst. We find some of the towns don't do well in summer because they're overpopulated. They feel too overpopulated. Others absorb the tourism well. And in winter, some of the towns feel a little too dead, and others have a year-round feel to them that I think were important to us anyway. So that's the other thing I would recommend.
How about Alicante? Is it lively or somewhat outside of tourist season?
Yeah, it really doesn't change that much. That's what's strange. The beach side, like Playa San Juan area, does change. That's one of the big beaches here. The city itself is pretty much lively year round.
Even though it's a tourist town, it's pretty also, interestingly, very much of a working Spanish town. So it's got year-round things happening all the time.
Spanish love their festivals.
Yeah.
There are festivals constantly. So and between that and the performance arts and all of that stuff, it has a year-round life. And yet the summer season doesn't feel packed because the beaches are huge, and really, except in the center city beach, Posta gets kind of crowded, I think. But the rest of the beaches are so huge, and the density is not that high that it ever feels too crowded out on the beach, which for us, coming from the mid-Atlantic, was new.
Yeah.
Because our beaches just get crazy in the summer.
Yeah. So, guys, thank you very much for your time. I know I've taken a lot of your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to our audience before we say goodbye?
We've enjoyed doing it. Thank you for having us. It's been a blast. And anyone out there who's even remotely thinking about it, I want to stress that it's only been a positive experience for us. It's been a great adventure. And for all those adventurous types out there, I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you. And I hope to see you guys
Definitely.
soon on the horizon.
We'll get some takeout arroz for you and have it ready.
Yes, I can't wait. Arroz. All right, guys. We will be in touch. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast and consider making a donation by clicking the coffee cup on any page at www.wheredogaysretire.com. Each cup of coffee that you buy costs $5 and goes towards helping us continue the podcast. Thank you for your continued support.